When I say life is a team sport, I mean it. You have no chance of getting through this alone. You have a chance of getting through this with help. That's not to say that it's going to be easy. That's not to say that it'll be a perfect thing or whatever, but it's like there's at least hope. There is always hope when you reach out. We all overestimate what we can do alone and underestimate what we can do with even just a little bit of help. Hey, I'm Seye Adelekan and welcome to Performance Piece, a space for open and honest conversations about the highs and lows of life in music. Brought to you by myself and Music Minds Matter, we're putting mental health center stage with voices from across the industry, artists and crew, managers, etc. Each episode we dive into real stories and share what keeps us grounded and explore how to find peace in the chaos. If you're struggling or just need to talk, Music Minds Matters here 24/7. It's free and it's confidential and it's run by people who get it. Let's get into it.
Seye, you've toured the world and played some huge stages in your career. Could you tell us a bit more about your journey? How did that start and how did you get into music?
Well, I grew up in a Christian family and we sang a lot. There's always music in the home. Every night, in fact, 6 nights a week, we would read the Bible and sing as a family. So my dad would get the songbooks out. He had a guitar that he played, and people would pick a song, and then we'd start singing. And I'm the youngest of six, so I've got three brothers, two sisters, and we would all I'd be listening to them breaking out into harmony and all this stuff, and I didn't really know what that was, but I was getting a musical education quite early on. And one thing about singing music in church is that it kind of teaches you to connect emotionally with music, because that's the whole kind of point in the faith. So I was getting that sort of in me, and just as growing up, I was just playing music with friends. I always had a guitar in the house, so I'd like tinker on my dad's guitar. My brother Benga's a bass player as well, Olu Benga in Metronomy. So like I'd be playing on his bass, and I had a band with my friends in Bromley, a band called Also Fed. So I was always playing things. I also played the flute as well. I was in Bromley Youth Concert Band. So music kind of was always around, but I never really thought of it as becoming a job. Um, it's as it is today. There's not really a clear career path into it. So what I did was I was sleeping on my brother's couch when I was on my gap year. I was going to read English at uni, and in that gap, he was playing for Jerry Walmsley, and he couldn't do one particular tour. This is going back to 2006, and he was just like, "Hey, try and learn these songs, cover me, and see if you can get the gig." And I covered him, and I guess I'm still technically on my gap year.
Amazing. And how did you build from there? What happened next for you?
Um, as is quite often the case with music, it's not necessarily just ability that gets you jobs, but I did one job and I did it well, which led to me being recommended for another job and did that well, which led to me getting recommended for an audition, and I tried and I didn't get that one, but I got an audition from the back of that. It became this sort of thing that you have to kind of just keep spinning these plates, but quite often how you get jobs isn't necessarily just your ability, because I'm a pretty good guitar player and bass guitar player. But I think where I have thrived is like making good connections and kind of not using them, because that sounds a little bit too sort of gross, but it's like capitalizing on all these opportunities and sort of make an impression when I've met people, and kind of gone out my way to be nice, to make a cup of tea, and remember people's names, look people in the eye, those sorts of things, and be reliable. That's not to say I've always been perfect, but I've always tried to not just be a good player, but also be good to be around. Um, and also just like DMing people on like MySpace and stuff, and booking my own shows when I was doing solo shows, and playing loads and loads and loads of open mic nights. Also doing my own music, which led to other connections as well. So it's it's quite an all-encompassing thing when you're trying to make a life in music, because you have to be able to do so many different things.
Mm. And what are you working on at the moment? What have you recently been doing?
At the moment, I'm sort of in the middle of quite a lot of Gorillaz rehearsals. That has taken up basically all of my time, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful privilege to be in that live band and to play with people like Damon and all the people that he brings around him, uh, as well as doing things like this, which really excites me because I'm a big advocate for mental health. I have a history of addiction and mental health sort of issues. So I think it's really important for people in my position to not only talk about the highs, like all the great things, which is amazing. Like the highs are so high, which is actually one of the reasons why the lows can be so crushingly low.
Yeah.
Like when this job is good, it is great. It's better than anything else. I attribute it like, or I think of it like this: like when I'm on stage, I feel the most myself than anywhere else in the world. Um, and when you're on stage and there's lots of people and they're on your side and you're on their side and things going great, it's like the best place in the world. But when you're on stage and you feel terrible, when you're on stage and it's not going well, it is the worst possible place you could be. Because now you have thousands of people looking at you being vulnerable and feeling terrible. Um, so it's so important for people who perform in any way to really be on top of their mental health, because I mean, as well as taking substances and alcohol, etc., your body just goes through like these adrenaline spikes and dumps, and you're sleepless, you're not eating necessarily very well, you're changing country every 10 minutes, um, sleeping in cars, like it's all quite, it can be quite a battlefield mentally.
Mm.
So um, I'm actually really excited about this, and like I can't wait to talk to loads of different people um, about their experiences in this crazy music world.
So, was there a point for you when you realised that there was a connection between your mental health and mental well-being and what you do for work?
I think I probably didn't realize how connected they were until I really sort of hit rock bottom and I had to go into rehab. And like I got away with it for so long, like sort of heavy drinking, heavy substance abuse, just sort of not really eating, not really taking care of myself. I could still play. So in my mind, I was all right. But when it got to the point where I couldn't even sort of pay my rent, I couldn't even look at my friends in the eye, I wasn't answering my phone. I was like, actually, if you gave me a job right now, I would not be able to even do it. Um, that's unfortunately for some where it really hits, because once it starts affecting your work, which is also for a musician basically your identity, um, that's when it really starts messing with you. And in the rehab program that I did, which was called Teen Challenge UK, I wasn't allowed to touch a musical instrument for the first 16 weeks. It's a long residential program. It's 44 weeks, so it's 10 months. And then you do 6 months as like a post program. Uh, but that was an identity crisis. So I'm like, not only can I not play, I can't use any of the substances I use to calm all the demons, etc. I'm in a house with 30 other men getting off all sorts of things, and there's no phone, no TV, no internet. Um, who am I? What do I do? And no matter what we do, we try. I don't like to think of myself as just a musician. Like it's something that I do and something that I love. But I think we all need to have other things going on. We all need to have self-esteem and self-worth from other sources, or just from inside. Not just from outside and not just from work, because work changes, society changes, culture changes, life happens, and you might need to move country. You might need to, in fact, moving countries. Why I didn't study music sort of at uni, for example. I've lived in a few places. Nigeria, where I was born, lived in Holland, lived here, and I've lived in Ecuador. And in Ecuador, which is where I did my sixth form, I couldn't do music or drama, which were my two other like A star actually subjects. Um, so I had to do all these other things, which led to me not being able to do it for uni. Um, which changed the trajectory of my life. But then it also still led me into music anyway. So you just don't know how things are gonna go, and you have to have a foundation of who you are that is not related to your job or your skills. You just have to. And I highly recommend you get some hobbies that you don't get paid for.
100%. I mean, is there any advice that you could give someone who might be feeling that at the moment? I think it's probably very relatable, as you say, for a lot of musicians, how to kind of build your confidence in those other areas outside of purely being work focused.
In a weird, so having a hobby, which sounds quite flippant, and maybe I said it quite flippantly, but I think it's really interesting what happens when you're doing something where you're a beginner and there's all this scope for improving. So, for example, my favorite thing to do is cook. I love cooking. It's endlessly creative. It's also you know you could be cooking for 30 years and still have more to learn. As any great chef will tell you. Um, there are basics found, fundamentals to get, which then you can apply to loads of different things. And I'm constantly humbled by it. And I think there's something to be said for anyone who's looking for some sort of, uh, I don't know, inspiration in this. It's like find something that you're all right being bad at,
Mm.
um, because everybody needs that humility. But you can also just point these feelings at when, say, like work might be going badly or whatever. You have somewhere else to take it, as opposed to some of the things that we often turn to um, that aren't necessarily good for us. But then also, there's something about leaning into your friends. I'm very, very privileged to have an amazing network of friends, not even just musicians, but just lots of my mates from Bromley, where I grew up, who I can just hang out with and just not be thinking about music, not be thinking about work. Staying connected and staying grounded to people who don't do what you do, I think, is also really cool. Because if you're just talking shop all the time, you can't get away from it. Um, yeah, like you're a human and you're a person first, and then you do all this other stuff. So nurturing those relationships and the people that make you feel connected and grounded, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. So today we are recording the very first episode of Performance Piece. Could you tell me a little bit more about why you decided to do this and what Performance Piece means for you personally?
So I've been through a lot, I'd say, in my life, and in particular in the music industry. Even though I always think of myself as like being a young whippersnapper, because I was always the youngest in the band for a long time. Because I started when I was 18, but I realise I'm 37 now, and I think I've got quite a lot to talk about, or can facilitate conversations about these things, because peace is something that I think every creative person seeks. Um, and it's something that actually I think everybody is capable of finding, but it might mean different things to different people. It might mean approaching it in different ways for different people. Um, it might mean you only have it for a period of time, and you have to move through some things and get to the other side, and like you chase it. It's like this. When I say peace, I don't mean perfection, because there is no such thing. Uh, and there's always times where you don't feel settled, you don't feel at peace, but you can always find a north star or some way of getting yourself out of it. And I just want to have these conversations with people to find all these diverse and interesting ways that people find a way to seek that north star. How do you pull yourself out when you're feeling terrible? How do you even help a friend when they're feeling terrible? um, Everybody has a story. I think everybody is creative. Um, and that's from the person who drives the trucks that you don't normally hear from in the music industry, to the caterers at the venue that you don't normally hear from, to music managers, to artists that we hear from a bit more often, guitar techs. There's 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 a war going on inside of everyone. Um, but there's also great potential for peace. And I think sharing these stories will help way more people than I think we're even aware of to find that for themselves.
So, for you, was there a point where you had a low moment, and how did you come out of that the other side?
I mean, I had quite a lot of low moments. Not gonna lie. Um, I would find myself often, on tour with no money, having spent all my tour money in sort of really, really dodgy situations with people. And then when I get off the road and have the big come down, I'd sort of just go out with people I really shouldn't be spending any time with, spending thousands of pounds a week on just gear and I don't mean guitars. And when it got to the point where I was like not eating, not paying my rent, surrounded by, like, my bedroom had literally from the door to my bed, which was say this high, it was just old bottles, clothes, food, like rotting, like old plates of food and pizza boxes and stuff. And you couldn't get to the bed, I had to jump to the door. Um, and I got into such a state, my girlfriend at the time, and I think a few of my friends called up my parents and were just like, you need to come get your boy, because it's not, I was able to hide it quite well from my family because I didn't live near any of them. Uh, and I always say this to say that it took help. I can do it myself. Um, and I would say this to anybody. It's like, you don't do anything of worth in a vacuum. Um, Life is a team sport. And I think we all have to lean on someone else in those moments. I got taken out. My mum had to come and move me out my flat. Um, and I think about that all the time. 'Cause the things she must have seen in that room was like horrendous. And I'll forever be grateful to her for that. I moved in with my parents for a while, and then I got into this facility. Um, and I urge anyone to reach out to those around them, or if you've got a friend who's struggling, I guarantee you they cannot get through this alone. They need your help. Um, so reach out, and to anyone who needs to reach out, I think we all, I think, overestimate what we can do alone and underestimate what we can do with even just a little bit of help.
What would you say is a challenge that musicians or those working in the music industry face, or a pressure that people who don't work in the industry or aren't musicians might not be aware of?
It's funny, I think music and sort of the creative arts are in the culture a lot more now than they ever have been. I think more people are involved in listening to music and going to seeing gigs a lot more. And people kind of know that we're facing a battle with things like the rise of AI, which I think are stressors, and also the disappearance of small venues. Like when I started touring in like 2006, you could do entire UK tours, like in the tens of city stops, in the tens of venues, just around the UK in a split van to like a few hundred people, and that was, you could do a decent run of it like that. Whereas now you probably play about 5 or 6 major cities, or whatever, and like that's kind of you done. Um, I think there's so much pressure for musicians because there are less and less ways of actually making sustainable living. Like you have to be able to do so many different things. Like not only do I write my own songs or record my own songs, but I'm a session musician in bands live. I'm a musician in my own right in the studio. Me and my friend Charlie Morton, it's got God and No Music, and we compose for like adverts and stuff like that. I've got a voiceover agent. You've got to kind of cover so many bases to make a decent living, and it's a real stress. And I'm also intrigued to ask that same question to people, say in the catering side of things, people in the trucking side of things. Like, has it changed much for music managers now that artists aren't making the same money? Like, or are they getting their revenue from elsewhere? Like, how's that with, like, say, music lawyers as well? Like, I think people don't understand how broad the threat is to a musician. Like, it's never been easier to make music, but it's never been harder to make money from making music.
Mm. So if there was a musician watching this who's trying to build and develop their career, would you advise them to work on their portfolio career and build up these different income streams?
Yeah, I'd say try and be good at a few things. Like if you're an instrumentalist, which is great, like learn your trade, but also learn how to present it. So learn about social media, learn about how you can use your phone to get these things. Learn about getting good audio quality on your phone, because basically TikTok or your Instagram page is your CV now. Maybe just have a mailing list as well to stay connected with people. If you want to do things off these sites, maybe you want to start a Patreon or something like that. And also with something like YouTube, you can do so much research as well yourself. So I think it takes a lot more study than just being good at music. Unfortunately, it would be great if it was just a case of being good at music, but in some ways, it's actually a really good challenge because what you will realize is you're far more capable than you actually think you are. Like you can learn different skills, you can do different things. Oh, you might find, oh, actually, I really like making content. Oh, I really like reading books about this. I didn't know that. I'm going to study that. Maybe you suddenly have this love for like cinematography and learn about lights and cameras, and it actually takes you in a new career path. Um, it takes a lot more sort of exploring really to find where you want to go with this. But I think you should just start trying to expand your skill set a little bit. Social media, I think, is unfortunately essential.
So looking back at your career, you spend a lot of time touring. And as a touring musician, you're spending intense periods of time with people. So there might be people you know and you're working with very closely, but you're also going to be meeting people every single day and working with new people every day. Despite being surrounded by lots of people when you're on tour, is there a moment when you've ever felt isolated?
It's a good question, and in a weird way, even though you kind of tour together, you also tour alone. Like you've got your own way of doing things. Everybody responds to the stimulus of touring in different ways, and there's just something so strange about, say, playing to thousands of people, or even hundreds of people, or even tens of people, and then being alone that night in your bedroom, full of adrenaline, with nowhere to like point it, or pointing it in certain directions that can be problematic. I felt isolated all the time. I think I've made the mistake as well of being far too insular on tour. In particular, when I was fresh out of rehab and sort of just starting to play again, I think I went a bit too hard in the sort of let me just get through this, white knuckle this, sort of do my gig, go back home, do my gig, go back home. And I actually didn't interact with people that I was working with as much as I should have done. I didn't actually say I was struggling as much as I should have done. I I really think that actually I did let myself down a little bit in that respect. Um, but yeah, I felt it hard, but I also felt it when I was not sober as well. It can be a really really isolating thing because also most of the people can't relate. Like your family and your friends, unless they're all in music. It's like the only people you can talk to about what you do are the people that you do it with. So yeah, it can be really really tough. It's in particular that sort of the cool down of being in your hotel room after a show. It's such a strange sort of quiet private moment where I actually really think you can do a lot of good work. You can do a lot of interesting introspection, being like, how do you feel? Like, how did this day go? How was that gig? Do I feel good about this? Do I feel bad about this? What am I struggling with? Because everything is so like souped up. Like in some ways, that's actually one of the most clear moments. Like you have such clarity. You know how you feel about life in those moments. So yeah, it's worth kind of digging in and exploring that moment when you're alone.
So if there's someone watching this now who's a musician or someone who works in the industry who's going through a hard time or has struggled in the past, what piece of advice would you give to them and where would you suggest they turn?
I mean, I think I've said it before, but when I say life is a team sport, I mean it. You have no chance of getting through this alone. You have a chance of getting through this with help. That's not to say that it's going to be easy. That's not to say that it'll be a perfect thing or whatever, but it's like there's at least hope. There is always hope when you reach out. Music Minds Matter, a great place to go to for advice. And it's not even just when you're in absolute crisis. I think actually, preventing getting to that point is actually really important. So reaching out when you're just feeling a little bit low, reaching out when you're having a bad time on tour, reaching out when you're about to embark on a project but not sure how to do that and feeling anxious. All these things are really important. Head to my website / head to my page, because I'm constantly chatting to people and I'm constantly in my DMs with people with questions, and just giving some encouragement and just showing that there is hope. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, there is always hope. And again, I'm not to say that everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be rosy, because there is no such thing. Nobody has a perfect life, sober or in the madness, whatever. But you have support. You are not alone. There are people out here who care.
I really like that you touched on there that preventative support as well. I think that's so important, and Music Minds Matter, that's something we really try and emphasise with all the musicians and industry folk that we work with, that actually you can reach out to us beforehand, before you're in a crisis. Is there anything you do preventatively for your own health and well-being to help you stay well?
Well, the power of no is so important. I think one thing that actually is true about addicts, you tend to say yes to everything. You just want more. Actually, one of the things I'm most proud of is I say no now when I mean it.
Yeah.
And that's not to say obnoxiously, but also, again, most people aren't as offended by you saying no as you think they probably will be. So if I want to go to an event, I will go to it. If I don't, I won't just go and feel resentful for going. So say, I say yes when I mean yes. I say no when I mean no, as much as I can, I would say it's really important for you to work out how you react to stimulus, because again, everybody's different. There are so many different ways to look after your mental health, and it's all very, very personal.
So looking back at when you started out in music, your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself, or what do you wish you'd known about mental health when you were younger to enable you to positively grow in your career, and that would have been helpful for you to support you in your development?
I think I got into a lot of trouble in my life for fear of being honest. Honest about how I was feeling about, say, even partners, but honest about how I was feeling about my music. Honest about when I felt uncomfortable or comfortable, and I would say most things are going to work out a lot better if you just say how you actually feel, if you just do what's actually real to you. Because a lot of the times things start to get darker, and you start reaching for these other things that aren't necessarily good for you when you're out of alignment with who you are and how you feel actually on the inside. So I would say try and listen to your instinct, try and be as honest as you can, because ultimately, even though it might in the short term be safer, be more comfortable, in the long term, it's actually like that damage doesn't go, it just collects and eventually it comes out. So I would say be as honest as you can in as many ways as you can, as much as possible.
So looking forward to the rest of this series, why did you want to partner with Music Minds Matter for this bit of work?
So I think it's so important, I think, and ever more so actually, the landscape of music is changing so much, and there's never been more of a sort of high demand for like mental health and things that sort of help people get through this. I'm such a big supporter of Music Minds Matter, and I think people think of the music industry as just this sort of wild, creative, fun, not very serious thing. But as we've sort of discussed, it's like you put yourself out there, and whether that goes good or bad, it all affects you. And not just the people on stage, but the hundreds of people that are involved in, say, putting any one gig together. So I think it's really important to have these conversations to let people know that they'll be all right, but also some of the pitfalls of what comes with this, how this is as important a job, I think, as any other. Um, and thus, like with any job, there are real effects in real life, and it really causes so much damage when not looked after. Um, we don't have we have things like the musicians union, but it's like a different. This isn't like a traditional job where there's like clear representation and there's obvious parameters of how you do this and you get compensation for that, etc. So it's like in many ways, even though it's a relatively old industry, we're still figuring it out. And I think what's bad, you can't get anything bad from having a little bit more help on the way.
What would you say you'd like people working in music to take away from this conversation and also conversations which are coming up?
I think the most important thing to take away from this conversation is that there actually is help available out there. And that is at no matter what stage in this sort of mental health spectrum you are, like whether you are feeling at your wit's end, like when you're at your lowest of your low, or you've just come off a tour, you feel low, you've got the tour blues, and you just want someone to chat to because none of your mates understand, and you want to just kind of de-stress about what's just happened. It's like there's such a big spectrum there, and I think everybody can do with a little bit of help, no matter what part of that they're on, and you can get that help here.
What grounds you before a gig?
What grounds me before a gig? I do ginger shots. That's mine. I used to do vodka shots, but I no longer do those. So ginger shots, bit of a livener, then I go.
Excellent. What is your peace ritual after a show?
After a show, I like changing. Like you finish a gig, you put on the clothes that you do your show, and you take them off. There's a mental separation between you and the person on stage in some ways. And then I do whatever I feel. I'll eat. I don't care. I will eat what I feel like eating, whether it's 11 p.m. and I want chicken wings. I'm going to eat them. I'm going to give myself anything that I want. Really, that's not anything horrible. And just go back to my room and put on Netflix or something or YouTube, etc. I won't force myself into doing something I don't want to do. I won't just go to the gym because I've been told to do that. Like I'm just going to give myself as many yeses as I healthily can.
Nice. And what's one thing that you do kind of day to day that helps you look after your mental health?
Of late, actually, I've started doing gratitude lists every day. I did that in rehab, and I fell off that practice, but I've found that so helpful recently to keep me involved. And it doesn't even matter whether it's day or night, whether you're talking about being grateful for air conditioning or grateful for something really deep and poetic. Sitting there and being grateful, even for 5 minutes, can only have a positive effect on your day. It makes you kind of think about things in perspective, and I think it puts positive energy into you. So that's become one of my current everyday things.
Excellent. And is there something you do which helps you feel calm and centered, whether that be before a show or whilst you're on tour or a day at home?
I love cooking. Something simple like that kind of just reminds me that things will be all right. I can look after myself. And speaking of looking after yourself, I hear a lot of people talking about a lot of musicians looking down on themselves for having a job and then that, but it's not music. And I think if you can look after yourself, if you're paying your bills in whatever way you can, there's nobility in that. Don't beat yourself up for working in a pub while you're working on your dream. Like, it's all good. Look after yourself. Do what you need to do to look after yourself.
And just looking forward, what are you most excited about as the host of Performance Piece?
I'm excited about chatting to some mates, but I'm also excited to talk to people that you've probably never heard from in the music industry, such as people, say, the catering side, people from the trucking side, people from the tech side, people from in the legal side and publishing, whatever. Because actually we're all in this together, and it takes way more people to do things, especially on a big scale, than you actually realize. So I'm looking to learn from them. I'm looking to learn something about myself. I think these conversations will be really beneficial, so I'm just well excited.
Amazing. We're very excited too. And finally, just to wrap up, we've kind of covered it already, but if there is someone listening right now who is struggling, what would you say to them?
I would say life is a team sport and you are not alone.
Lovely. Thank you, Seye.
Thank you. I need to work on that. If you or anybody you know has been affected by some of the things you've heard, there are going to be a bunch of free Music Minds Matter resources beneath this video.